Today's topic, everybody, is going to be a lot more on the administrative side of what's important to be a realtor. But we're going to look at it still through the perspective that you need to understand as a real estate agent. So even though you're not necessarily, as agents on the Mogul team, going to be the one who's filing, filling out, uploading to SkySlope every last little bit of paperwork that is associated with doing a deal successfully, you still got to know how it works. Because if you don't understand the ebb and flow of how a deal comes together, then you're going to be lost in the weeds for every transaction. You're going to end up with situations where you're missing key events, or you're going to miss stuff on behalf of your client, and then the deal is going to be going less smooth because your client is not happy. Or you're going to be waiting on, you're going to be waiting on, or the lawyers and mortgage brokers are going to be waiting on you. You'll be the weak link. And then the ultimate worst case scenario is you lose a deal because of an easy to avoid administrative oversight, or you don't get paid on a deal because your paperwork isn't in successfully. So what we're going to do today is we are really going to spell out the internal language and the flow of how a deal works and some of the key terminology associated with doing real estate transactions. So we're going to talk about both of those things, because the first thing that I want to make sure that we understand is just how the flow of a deal progresses. The second thing that I want to talk about is some of the words that get used, when they get used, and why they get used. So for example, you hear me using the word deal. You've probably heard that word used to describe multiple points in the process, and it's confusing because you'll say, oh, I got a deal. Oh, there's a deal on the go. Oh, we're working on a deal. It's like, what exactly is it that you're working on or doing when you say that? It's an important question. It's important to understand the context surrounding that question. So we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about the way that a real estate transaction works. So let's start from the beginning. So the first thing that happens is, remember, we've got our 5 steps, S1 through 5, of the real estate sales cycle. So step 1 is generate the lead. Step 2, prospect the lead. Step 3, have the meeting with the potential client. Step 4 is activate the client. And then step 5 is do the deal. So we're going to be talking about really what happens in step 5. So the thing that moves you from step 4 to step 5 is writing an offer to purchase. And when that offer to purchase gets accepted, you're really in step 5 of the sales process, which is do the deal. Now, that step 5 is broken down into 4 phases, 4 administrative pieces that are very easy to delineate and that you have to understand quite intimately. So again, I'm going to reiterate just how unbelievably critically important understanding and gaining a mastery of this piece of the conversation is, because ultimately the most important thing about being a realtor is doing transactions, helping people buy and sell houses, doing deals. This is showtime. This is game time. Everything we put all of this unbelievable effort into leads up to doing deals. It's what we're here for. It's the sexiest, most exciting part about being a realtor. It's what gets us paid. So if you're not very good at it, you're gonna have a hard time making deals happen and getting paid. And I can tell you that that will be a huge bummer for you. So we want to be good at this. We want to understand it. We want to be speaking the same language, so that when you're talking to admin or talking to other realtors, you can intelligently describe what's happening, what's going on. We can be using the same languaging to keep everything consistent and tight. So I'm going to talk about first what the 4 phases are. So there are 4 distinct phases, and each phase takes time. There is a duration of time that happens in each phase where certain things need to happen. The way that we get from one phase to another is by way of what's called a triggering event. So a triggering event is one thing that happens in a very specific window. So, it can almost be something that happens like that. Whereas a phase can be drawn out over days, weeks, or even months. So I'm going to roll it back to the beginning so that we can really start understanding it. And then we'll do some visual representation. So I'm going to go over it really quickly at first. So the very start of this whole process is when you get a client. So we actually have event 1, which is 0.25, which gets us back into the third step of having a client. Event 0.25 is signing your buyer's brokerage and getting your compliance paperwork sorted. So basically, officially, they're your client. Now, between 0.25 and onwards, that can take, shopping could take months. You could show them one property and they could buy it, or everything in between. So the thing about the paperwork in 0.25 is sometimes we don't get it filled out before we actually start performing real estate services for somebody. Not ideal, because we know that, and we've all had experiences where you think somebody's your client, but because your paperwork isn't in order, they end up going and buying something else with another realtor, and that sucks. And then we feel really crummy about it. So we really want to be putting our time and effort into clients who've committed to be our client. And that happens by way of buyer brokerage and compliance paperwork. And when we do our buyer consultation meetings, that's why the buyer brokerage agreement is so carefully and thoughtfully woven into that meeting agenda, because the specific intention is the whole point of a buyer's meeting is to ensure that somebody becomes your client. That's why we do it. And so you're not going to get any real traction having someone become your client unless you've got the paperwork in order. So that's 0.25. It's just getting your buyer's paperwork in order. Now, the next event that we're going to get to is writing the offer. So that's what kicks off the whole process. We put pen to paper, we write an offer. So triggering event 0.5. So keep in mind, all of the events are halves. All of the phases are the numbers. So phase 1, event 0.5, event 1.5, phase 2, we're going to get into it. So 0.5 is we write an offer. In Alberta, we call it the OTP, offer to purchase. In Vancouver, we call it the CPS, contract of purchase and sale. We know what an offer looks like. We fill it out, we send it to the selling realtor. Okay, so then things are getting underway. Now, if we're on the flip side of the coin and we're representing the seller, it's the same event. The only difference is, instead of sending an offer to the selling realtor, now what we're doing is we are receiving an offer from a potential buying realtor. Either way, whether we're working for the selling client or the buying client, the 4 phases of a transaction are the exact same. It's just 2 sides of the same coin. Now, what we'll do is we'll pause here and let's talk from a terminology perspective. So when we use the word transaction, we are referring to everything that happens in this 4-phase process, everything from writing a contract to removing conditions to closing the deal. That all refers to the whole process. Now, typically when we say deal, oftentimes I see a lot of realtors use the word deal to describe one part of this whole process, either writing an offer or getting conditions waived or whatever. They say, oh, I got a deal. Technically speaking, this whole transaction is what we refer to as a deal. So whether you want to call it a transaction, whether you want to call it a deal, the whole process that we are going in is either called a transaction or a deal. So if you're writing an offer, that isn't technically getting a deal. It would be initiating a deal. It would be the first start of a deal, the first start of a transaction. But if you want to avoid confusion with everybody that you're working with, don't just say I wrote a deal. Say, oh, I wrote an offer to purchase. I did a 0.5. Now, let's do a little Q&A, because I know a lot of you guys know the answer to this. So we'll just make it more interactive. So once you write and submit an offer to purchase and either receive it from a buyer or send it to the seller, then what happens?
Assuming it's been accepted.
What happens before it's accepted?
The negotiation.
Bingo bango. So phase one is the negotiation phase. So proper terminology would say, oh, I'm negotiating an offer. I'm working on negotiating a contract to purchase, or I'm working on, like you're negotiating. So that's why, like, writing an offer, that's a teeny little event. You write it up, you sign it, you send it. Bing, bang, boom. That's one thing. Now you can get the admin team to help you by drafting up an offer. Maybe even you can get the admin team to send it to your client for signatures on the offer. And if you're in really good flow with the admin team, you could even ask them to send it to the selling realtor on your behalf. That's all support that you can get. But if you don't have a good mastery of the terminology, the languaging, and you don't know how to request with a high level of detail, look, I need an offer drafted on this MLS number. Here's the price, here's the deposit, here's the terms, here's the this, here's the that. If you're not able to be crystal clear, it's more difficult to get admin to help you because they keep having to come back saying, what are you talking about? What are you asking me to do? If you can give clear and precise instruction, then everything just happens on your behalf. So while this is about the 4 phases, one of the takeaways that I want you guys to have from this is you have to be incredibly accurate and precise with your requests, your languaging, and what you're describing in this process to be able to delegate more to admin. If you say to admin, hey, I need you to write up a deal for so-and-so, admin's going to say, well, I don't really know what you're asking me to do. All I have is the person's name. I don't know the address. I don't know the price. I don't know the this. I don't know the that. And it's going to take more time because you gave an unclear instruction. Whereas if you send a hyper clear instruction and say, look, I need an offer to purchase written for this client at this address. Here's the price. Here's the deposit. Here's the conditions. Here's the closing date. All the details. Once that's drafted, send it to me for review. Once I approve it, I will get you to send it to the client for signatures, and then I will have you submit it to the selling realtor. Crystal clear. Now, 30 to 45 minutes of the work associated with event 0.5, writing and submitting the offer, you can actually get administrative support from. It's possible, it's doable, but it requires clear instruction, precise communication. So that's part of what we're doing in this session is we're getting that precision around what the 4 phases of a deal, a transaction are. So I heard the right answer already, but let's keep it interactive. So what is the outcome of a negotiation if things go the way we want them to?
An accepted offer.
An accepted offer. Bingo bango. What is it specifically that we need to see on that paperwork that lets us know it's an accepted offer?
Signed by both parties.
Exactly. It's signed by both parties. Now, usually over the course of that negotiation, one party, sometimes both parties, request changes to that contract. So how do we know that we have a firm contract? By looking at that paperwork. We have the signatures. What else do we have?
Amendment?
Not an amendment. We wouldn't have amended anything yet. That's not an amendment.
Initials on the changes.
Precisely correct. Thank you, Kyla. All of the changes will have been made on the contract. So for example, let's say that the price was a subject of negotiation. The original offer price would be crossed out. The agreed upon price would be written in. Both parties would initial that change. So we know event 1.5 has happened when we have a contract and or offer to purchase or contract of purchase and sale that's been signed by both parties where all changes have been initialed by both parties. So let's get clear on our languaging. That document is called an offer when it is in 0.5 and in negotiation in phase 1. Once it is signed by both parties, it stops being an offer and becomes a contract. So the contract is the document that dictates what's happening in terms of an agreed upon set of terms and pricing. An offer is just one party's proposal to the other. So event 1.5 is the offer is accepted and becomes a contract. So 2 takeaways here. The difference in terms between an offer and a contract. And again, that contract if you're referring to it as a deal, you're creating confusion. That contract is specifically a contract on property XYZ. The whole process we're referring to is a deal. So again, if you're saying, oh, I got a deal, people are, you're gonna get some confusion with everybody you're talking about, because while some people do refer to that event as a deal, what you actually have done is gotten an offer accepted, and now you have a contract. And if you use that language clearly, it's going to make admin's job easier. It's going to make all of the realtors' jobs easier. So what you need to do as an agent is, typically what happens is that document that's signed and initialed by both parties is going to come to you. You're going to get it. You're going to look at it. You're going to double check it for all of its initials and signatures and say, yep, we good. 1.5 has happened. Then what do we do with that? Now we verified that it is a contract. What do we do with it?
Send off to the lawyers? And
No,
mortgage brokers?
you're way ahead of yourself. Who do we send it to?
Admin.
Admin. Thank you, Kyla. Kyla, you're nailing it. So we've got our, the first thing we do is we verify that it's actually a contract. We don't want to be missing no initials. We don't want to be missing signatures. We don't want a bunch of sloppy jibber jabber, because what's going to happen? We're going to send it to admin. They're going to look at it. They're going to say this is incomplete, and work will be created for everybody involved, and confusion will ensue. We don't want confusion. We don't want to create extra work. We want smooth sailing through these 4 phases. So you verify that it's a contract, give it a quick little breeze through, send it to admin. Now, admin fires up the engines. At this point, this is where admin shines for us, and we enter phase 2. So phase 2 is an interesting one, because in Vancouver, sometimes we write unconditional offers and we just skip phase 2 altogether. Holy shit. Very exciting. But more often than not, there are going to be conditions on the contract, and we enter phase 2. So from a perspective of you as the realtor, we send that paperwork to admin. They then open a transaction checklist, which I'll show you in a minute, and we're in phase 2. Now, I've already given you guys the clue, but what do you think phase 2 would be called?
Subject removal.
Bingo. Subject removal period. What's another term for the subjects, or another word to describe the subjects?
Conditions.
Conditions. Exactly. So in our back office, we call it the condition period, but it wouldn't be false to call it the subject removal period either. Subject removal is two words. Condition period is 1. That's why we call phase 2 the condition period. So pop quiz. What are the most common subjects and or conditions? So I'm using the words that are interchangeable to make sure that everybody tuning in and everybody watching this video starts to understand all of these, where the words in the glossary of terms get interchangeable. So, help me out here, guys. What are some of our most common conditions and or subjects?
Financing.
And inspection, property inspection.
And what's the third one that happens sometimes on a specific type of property?
Subject to sale of property.
Okay, subject to sale to property. I'm actually going to put that as an outlier over here, because that does happen very rarely on occasion. But what's
a strata?
Strata. Okay, thank you, Eric. So, little FYI, in BC, we call that common property strata. In Alberta, we call it condo. Okay, 2 words for the same sort of setup. So we've got our 3 conditions. So in that condition period, a whole lot of moving parts happen. So let's talk about the moving parts specifically as they pertain to each of those 3 conditions. So let's look at the inspection first. So we have subject to a condition of inspection. So we know inspecting the property means typically a home inspector comes out, checks out the property, produces a report, and in a perfect world, that report says the property is in great shape. In an imperfect world, it's not in great shape. So what are some of the things that need to happen for that whole inspection condition to be satisfied? A couple of really easy answers here, and a couple of slightly more complex ones.
Buyer's satisfaction.
The buyer, yeah. So the buyer has to be satisfied with that inspection. But in order to satisfy that condition, what do we need to do?
Actually get an inspection.
Book an inspection. Exactly. So, pretty straightforward, but it's got to happen. And the thing about an inspection is that there's a lot of people involved because you, the buyer's agent, the buyer, the homeowner, the selling realtor, and the inspector all need to be coordinated to make the same thing happen at the same time. Not a small feat. So prep it early, prep it often, make it happen. Okay, so for the financing condition, what needs to happen?
Appraiser needs to book an appraiser.
We need to book an appraisal. Exactly. Now, typically the mortgage broker does that, but usually they'll communicate that through you as the buyer's agent. What else needs to happen to satisfy the financing condition?
The mortgage broker needs a copy of the contract.
Bingo bango. Mortgage broker needs a copy of the contract. What else does the mortgage broker need a copy of? They need the contract, which is the document that's signed by both parties. They also need one more item.
The MLS sheet.
Exactly, the realtor's MLS sheet. So everything I just described, typically admin will do that. That's part of admin's business process and checklist, is sending all this stuff to the mortgage broker, making sure it all happens. And then they will carbon copy you as the agent, just so that you have the peace of mind of knowing that this stuff has happened. Because one of our main foundational pieces of good communication as a team is it only counts that you did it if you let the person know that you did it. So if you did something for your client, it only matters if they know that you did it. Otherwise, they're going to assume you didn't do it. If admin does something for you, if you don't know that admin did it for you, you're going to be like, oh, shucks, did admin do that thing? That's why I'm sure a lot of you have noticed that admin carbon copies you on stuff as it happens. They're just letting you know what happens. So you don't have this little gremlin in the back of your mind saying, oh, crap, did the mortgage broker get the contract and the listing? I hope so. I don't know. So that's the financing condition. Strata doc / condo doc condition. What do we got to do?
Order condo documents or strata documents.
Exactly. And whose responsibility is it to provide those documents?
The seller.
Exactly. So if we're representing the buyer, we get that document package and then we review that document package, and assuming there's no issues in it, we're good to go. Now there's two ways that can go. We can either hire a third-party company to review those documents, or sometimes some buyers will be comfortable reviewing them with you as a realtor. Only do it if you're really comfortable as a realtor, by the way. That's not necessarily your responsibility, but if you're into it, no problem. Or some people will just review it on their own, or they'll get their lawyer or their accountant to do it. So that's a little bit more common in BC, that with the realtor, accountant, lawyer reviews it. In Alberta, it's much more common to have a third-party condo document checking company do it. So now we have done all of this work. So what phase are we still in, people? That's right, phase 2. So so in addition to that, what happens behind the scenes is that the admin team will be uploading everything that you need to SkySlope. So some of the other stuff is our compliance paperwork, FinTrack, agency acknowledgement, DORTS, that's a Vancouver one, privacy notice and consent, that's a Vancouver one. They will prepare a TRS, which stands for transaction record sheet in BC, or trade record sheet in Alberta. So those ones that'll be produced and uploaded as well. So there's a whole schwack of paperwork that admin is going to do on your behalf in phase 2, and you're going to love them and thank them for it, because it frees up your time to ensure that the conditions get removed successfully. Now, there are 3 things that are going to happen at the end of phase 2. One of them we love, one of them is really annoying, and one of them we hate. So what's the thing we love at the end of phase 2?
Condition removal.
Whoop, whoop. Exactly. What's the thing that's really annoying that we do because it's our job?
Extend conditions.
Extend conditions. That's right. Well, I guess that would be 2.5. And or, that was right, Dream, you got me. But what's the other thing that could happen at the end of the condition period?
Subject.
Pardon?
Not remove the subjects.
That's number 3, the thing we hate. What's the middle one?
Negotiations.
Renegotiations.
Oh,
Oh, the washing machine's leaky, the roof's creaky, the paint color is off. Insert reason that renegotiation happens here. I'm obviously being a little bit disparaging, because sometimes buyers will renegotiate over things that aren't particularly justified to renegotiate over, but sometimes there's legitimate issues with the property that need to be addressed. So if so, we'll deal with condition waiver last because that obviously moves things along. At this end of the spectrum, we have a non-waiver. So if we have a non-waiver, unfortunately, now the deal, the transaction, the process is over. It's dead. Do not advance. Have a pout. Get that person back out shopping, and or get that listing marketed double time. The middle one, where we need to either extend conditions or renegotiate. What document do we use?
Amendment.
An amendment document, precisely. And that document is really nicely laid out. It has a section that says delete. So whatever we're changing in the contract and removing, we put it in the delete piece. And then whatever we're adding to the contract, we put into the insert piece. Then what happens? How do we know that that document is now enforceable?
Signed
Both parties
signatures.
Signed by both parties. I heard two people say it and you were both right. That's awesome. So yeah, it gets signed off by both parties. Then who do we send it to?
Admin.
Admin. Yeah, you guys are getting the hang of this. Then admin takes it, files it, sends it to where it needs to go. The mortgage broker's going to need a copy of it. And then we march along. Now let's assume that now we're in good shape. We're ready to advance. We do number one. What's number one? We want to
Condition waiver?
finalize this. Exactly. We remove conditions. So same thing. Who signs that condition waiver document?
The buyer.
Exactly. And now the contract's finalized. The buyer is committed. We are good to go. So at this point, let's talk about languaging. Some people might say, I've got a done deal.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Just for sending stuff to admin, like, are we putting it in SharePoint and sending it to admin, or are we sending it to admin and they're putting it in SharePoint?
We send it to admin and they put it in SharePoint and upload it to SkySlope for us.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep.
I also have a question, sorry.
Yeah.
Because this is something that I've done is, I will remove conditions on an amendment. So like I'll put the amendment, like change the purchase price after renegotiation and then just delete the conditions.
You betcha. Yeah.
But other agents seem very hesitant to do that. They'd rather do a waiver. So what's up with, like, is it not supposed to do it that way, or?
We're technically allowed to do it because it's efficient. But some agents and some brokerages just haven't been trained on that technique or strategy. And because it's, outside of their training scope, they get a little bit wary about it and they'll ask their broker and then the broker's not sure. So, I mean, the answer is yes, we're allowed to do it, but some agents just get wary about it because they're not sure how to execute it properly. So, I mean, worst case scenario, if you have to do an amendment and a waiver on two documents, not a big deal, but it is much more straightforward and easy to do it on the same document. And
I
legally
can add on to
enforceable.
that real quick. So like in Vancouver, it's a little bit different documents, but I always like to put it on one because I don't like to give them the option of signing one and not the other. Like they could potentially take your waiver, sign that, and then opt not to sign the change in price or something. So I always like to put it all in one doc. So there's no option to sign one or the other.
Yeah. And when I'm like on the buyer side waiving conditions in that way, if it's two documents, I, for sure I'm not sending that waiver until I get the signatures on the amendment.
Exactly. So it kind of creates a 1-2 punch, which is a little bit more time consuming and inconvenient, which is why we like to do it on the same doc. It's A-OK in Alberta. And so, I don't want to get lost in the weeds about exactly how that executes. I really want to talk more about the phases, but that was a good question. Okay. So we call condition waiver event 2.5. So that's the triggering event. That's what gets us into the next phase of the transaction of the deal. So I want to pause here and talk about two words that, again, we kind of use interchangeably, but I want to make sure that we're not getting confused. So the first word is deal. So again, the deal describes the whole process. The second word is closing. So there's the word closing really creates a lot of confusion in real estate because there's two different industries here that deal with the word closing. Over here is the sales industry. In the sales industry, whether you're selling widgets, pharmaceuticals, real estate, whatever it is you're selling, closing, the definition of closing is creating an agreement between the buying and the selling party. So in industries where there's only one point of agreement, like, so-and-so agreed to buy 1,000 widgets. Okay, you close that sale, you close that deal. In real estate, we've got three different checkpoints where an agreement happens. Agreement number one is where we get that contract pending, signed by both parties. Agreement number two is where we waive conditions and agree to move forward. Agreement number three is the closing day, the possession day, where buyer sends money, seller sends title, and then we are allowed to release the keys. So that's why when you guys are probably hearing people say, oh, I closed the deal, oh, I closed it. Like, what are you talking about? Did you get an offer accepted? Did you waive conditions? Did you complete the sale and do possession? Well, unfortunately, that language from sales creates confusion in real estate. So as far as we're concerned, and as far as we want to do business, the closing day specifically refers to the day on the contract where money gets sent to the seller, title gets transferred to the buyer, and possession, key release happens. So we're not there yet. We're still at 2.5, which is subject to removal.
I don't know about Edmonton, but we have completion as the verbiage on our contract.
Yeah, completion date as well. And you'll hear people in Alberta call that day completion as well. So that's a couple of steps down the track, but we'll get there in a second. But for right now, if you're removing subjects, please don't say I closed the deal. Say we went unconditional, we waived subjects. Or you might even want to say we finalized the contract, but that one even starts to get a little confusing because finalized still is more interchangeable with closing, where it can apply to multiple touch points. So try to scrub the word closing out of your vocabulary, even though, especially if you have a sales background, you want to be a closer. You want to close the deal. But because there are so many checkpoints in a real estate transaction, it makes it a little bit trickier to use that languaging. And I'll even admit I'm pretty bad for using the word closing, because what you closed relates to the context around the closing, whether it's removing subjects or getting a contract pending by way of signature. So we're going to do our best to scrub that word closing and finalizing out of our languaging so that we're more accurate and it's easier to understand what we're doing. So we remove subjects. Now, again, if we wrote an unconditional offer, we just basically skip phase 2 and we're right at, and like event 1.5, signing the contract, and event 2.5 being unconditional, waiving the subjects, basically happen together, and we just, then all of that phase 2 work kind of gets skipped and shuffled into phase 3. That's the exception. But for the most part, we're going to have subjects. We're going to remove them in phase 2. Event 2.5 is removing subjects. So now we enter phase 3. So phase 3 is everything that happens before we close, possession, completion, key release, those 4 terms for that one event. That's event 3.5. So 2.5 is remove subjects, 3.5 is close, possession, completion, key release. Everything that happens in between is phase 3, which we call our closing period, because it's leading up to closing, which is event 3.5. So let's talk about some of the things that need to happen in phase 3, closing. What are some of the things that need to happen at that point? Who needs to get paperwork? What do we need to do on our end?
The admin, and then they send it off to the lawyers and the mortgage brokers.
Exactly. That's correct. So in phase 3, that's when the lawyer is selected for the client and the whole deal file is forwarded by admin to the lawyer. That's a huge important piece, because the lawyer is the one that ultimately closes the file in the real estate sense for event 3.5. And again, that's something that admin will do. What are some of the other things that happen in phase 3? So a lot of them are more customer service related. There's a clue. Okay, good thing we're having this workshop, guys. So some of the other things that happen is admin will send an expectation setting email to your client saying, hey, don't forget to cancel utilities on your current place. Don't forget to set up utilities on your new place. If it's a strata condo, it'll say, don't forget to get in touch with the condo board to book the elevator for moving and to prepare for paying your condo fees. Don't forget to set up your insurance, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just preparing the client. Don't forget to create your moving plan. We send out emails, and by we, I mean the admin team will send emails to your client, getting them prepared for that process. And then the lawyer gets the info. The other thing that you should be doing during phase 3 as a realtor is just call your client maybe once a week and say, hey, just checking in. You getting excited yet? Anything I can do to help? Just making sure things are smooth, you feeling ready? And you want to create your key release plan. So part of what we want to figure out is, where are the keys? In Edmonton, sometimes the selling realtor will leave the keys in the blue box on the property, so you can literally do key release on site. More often than not, the selling realtor will take the keys back to their brokerage office and you'll have to go pick them up there. So planning on when you're going to do your key release and where you're going to get the keys from is part of the gig. It's an important thing to do. So that is something that you want to make sure you've got a good handle on. So now we've gotten to 3.5, which is key release. So again, that's an event, that's a point in time. So key release is where things get really exciting. And this is where you get to use some of your personal flair and discretion as a realtor. Part of our closing process is gifting. So do you want to gift your client at the point of key release? Or do you want to give them a small token of appreciation at key release and then gift them after? There's no right answer. My personal preference, I like to have a double touch point. So I like to show up for key release, give them their keys, have a quick peek at the house, give them a token of appreciation, and then schedule something for 1 to 2 weeks afterwards to be able to have a second touch point, meet them in person, take them out for a dinner, or if they're more homebodies, bring them something to their home. Then you get an hour, hour and a half of conversation, FaceTime, you're building rapport, laying the foundation for repeat referral for business. Some of you guys just like to show up with a big old gift right at closing. No right answer, but important to make that part of the key release experience. Now we're not done yet. They've got their keys. Keys are released. Now we enter phase 4, heading towards event 4.5. So let's benchmark it. What do you guys think event 4.5 is?
Getting paid?
Getting paid. Exactly. So leading up to getting paid, what are some of the things that we want to do and that we need to put time and effort into in that post-closing period?
Sky slope documents.
Pardon?
Sky slope upload.
If you're uploading SkySlope after the file's already closed, you are in big time shit because you are about 2 phases too late. All of that should have happened starting in phase 2. So if you're uploading stuff after possession, you are scrambling reactively, not proactively. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind, is document upload to the brokerage. That's a phase 2 thing. That is not a phase 4 thing. So that is way behind. So keep in mind, if you're scrambling to upload documents to SkySlope after the deal has already closed, after possession has already happened, you're getting in trouble from all kinds of people. You're getting in trouble from admin, you're getting in trouble from management, and you're going to be getting in trouble from the conveyancers at the brokerage. So that's sloppy work. You should not be chasing documents and uploading them to SkySlope by the time you're in phase 4. What else? So what are some other things that would happen in phase 4?
Testimonials.
Bingo. We're getting our testimonial. 5 stars, baby. Locking it down, making sure they're happy, doing those post-closing service calls to make sure that the client's super excited. That's what should happen in phase 4. And then the other thing that would happen in phase 4 would be gifting. So again, whether you're gifting at event 3.5 or gifting in phase 4, either way, your client appreciation strategy should be incorporated into that part of the process. So to summarize, let's go through the 4 phases, and then I'm going to show you guys in just a little bit more detail how admin supports you and how you guys are going to be interacting with admin. So 0.25, that's when you sit down with the client, fill out your paperwork for achieving the client, which would either be your buyer's brokerage agreement, agency, DORTS, privacy notice, that whole thing. 0.5, we are writing an offer to purchase. Once that gets sent to the selling realtor, or once you receive it as a selling realtor, we are now in phase 1, which is negotiation. Once that offer gets accepted, signed by both parties, and becomes a contract, we enter phase 2, which is our condition period, where admin will ensure all documents are prepped, ready, and uploaded into SkySlope, and we work towards waiving our conditions, which is typically financing, inspection, strata documents, and in some unusual circumstances, you might have an additional bundle of conditions, potentially sale of buyer's home. But for the majority of cases, it's going to be financing, inspection, and potentially strata documents. So in phase 2, we're either going to have a little bit of renegotiation by way of extension of conditions or renegotiating based on the inspection or strata docs, or ideally everything goes smoothly and we waive conditions. That condition waiver is event 2.5, which gets us into phase 3, which is the closing phase, getting ready for closing, possession, completion, key release, all interchangeable for that same thing. During that phase 3, we're prepping the client for closing. We're making sure the lawyer has what they need to conveyance the deal. 3.5 is when we do our key release and gifting. In phase 4, we get our testimonial and do our post-client servicing calls. And then 4.5 happens and we get paid. We get our EFT form, and admin will take that file and then move it into our file archive. It'll get it, you'll see it on the commission tracker, et cetera, et cetera. So any questions about any of the phases? Because as you can see, whether you're receiving the condition waiver or sending the condition waiver, seller or buyer, it's the same general process, steps, and checklist. It's the same part of the transaction of the deal.
So maybe I misheard at the beginning. So phase 2.5 is once subject removals are signed by both parties and are removed.
So anything that's a 0.5 is an event, not a phase. An event
Okay.
moves you from one phase to the other. So you're right in saying that 2.5 is subject removal, but it's not a phase. It's an event. It's event 2.5.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. So let me show you what this looks like in the back end. So you send stuff to admin, you email it to them. They're doing stuff and emailing you to confirm that they've done it. Well, what the heck is going on over there? So let me show you. So this is what we're going to be releasing heading into the new year. We had a more dated version of this checklist, but Linda, in all of her wonderfulness, has color coded it, as well as really updated it to make it even more user friendly for our transaction coordinators. So every time a transaction gets started and or a deal gets started, one of these checklists applies to that transaction. So even for the deals that you guys have going right now, if we go into OneNote, whoops, I opened the wrong file. We have an older version of this checklist that's managing every single transaction we have on the go right now. So what ends up happening? Well, this is just a flow chart that helps admin support you. So you can see 0.25 initial paperwork, 0.5, we're writing the offer. So what admin will do is check that it's been completed, put the date that it's been completed, and initial who did it. So if there's any confusion, there's a paper trail that allows us to backtrack. For phase 1, we've got the offer. Once the offer is accepted, we have phase 1 negotiation. So admin doesn't really do much during negotiations. I mean, admin's just basically waiting for 1.5 to happen so that offer comes in. Once we get through 1.5, we're in phase 2, which is our pending period. We remove conditions. We get into pre-closing, keys are released in closing, post-closing service, and we receive our testimonial and get our EFT. So one of the things you guys have probably been seeing in the admin workshops is when Linda reviews the checklists for your deals with you. So the power of this checklist is that when you're talking with admin, if there's paperwork missing, we can say, well, hey, we're still kind of waiting on the COVID-19 hold harmless. Agent, did you fill that out? Is that complete? No? Okay, can you get it completed? Can you send it to me? Or you can say to admin, hey, I didn't quite get that piece of paperwork done. Could you please help me out by prepping that, sending it to the client for signature, and then processing it. So this checklist forms the platform upon which you can communicate with admin so that we all know where paperwork is at and where things are headed and how things are happening. So that's the power of this checklist. That's how we interface with admin. And even though you're not filling out all of the paperwork, even though you're not sending paperwork to where it needs to go, even though you're not uploading paperwork to SkySlope, team, it's absolutely impeccably critical that you understand how these 4 phases work and that you understand what needs to happen at each of the 4 phases so that you're not confused about your deal and you're not in a situation where you're already in phase 3 and you're like, oh shoot, I needed XYZ has happened or hasn't, or what's going on. It allows you to clearly articulate to admin like, hey, this deal is now in phase 2. I'm working on booking the inspection. If you can get the paperwork over to here, that would be great. Let's check in a couple of days, et cetera, et cetera. It also helps you mentally map out your pipeline because you'll know where your deals are at in terms of marching them down the field. It also helps you from a sales perspective, because the whole point of the sales cycle is to slowly and incrementally move your clients closer to completing a transaction. So when we think about it from the sales perspective, again, sales step 1 is generate leads. Sales step 2 is prospect those leads to book meetings, which is then sales step 3. The whole point of that meeting is to activate your client. Activating your client is administrative piece 0.25, which is signing your buyer's brokerage, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, now we're in phase 4. We're taking them out shopping. The whole point of taking them shopping is to write some offers. Great. So now that we're writing offers, we're in part 5. Part 5, step 5 of the sales cycle is broken down into those administrative phases. So now we're in step 5. Let's zoom in, open it up. We write an offer, we get it signed by both parties. 1.5, the offer is accepted. Okay, so you know that when you are in negotiation phase, your mind should be thinking, how do I move this thing closer to event 1.5? What do I need to do to create agreement to get this offer pending as a contract? Once you're in phase 2, you're asking yourself, okay, what do I need to do to move this thing along to 2.5? What can I do to move the needle on ensuring conditions get waived? Do I need to talk to the mortgage broker? Do I need to make sure paperwork is getting to the mortgage broker? Do I need to do something with the inspection? Are we renegotiating the inspection? Whatever it is, do not be the weak link in these steps. Everything is ordered and numbered in a way that just flows along nicely. So as a realtor, again, your mindset, your piece is to understand where you're at in that process, and wherever you are, understand what comes next and understand how you can bridge that gap to make the next thing happen. So, okay, you've waived condition, it's 2.5. Now we're heading towards closing. Well, we know that the objective of that is to make sure the client has a smooth possession and that we earn that 5-star review. So again, you need to be asking yourself, well, what can I be doing to make sure we have a smooth closing, to make sure the keys are going to be released on time, to make sure that that key release event is a nice situation, to make sure that I've got a closing gift ready, to make sure that they're going to be stoked about giving me a 5-star review. Okay, key release happens. Now what do I need to do in phase 4 to make sure that I can earn that testimonial and that my client's happy and that I get a repeat and referral? So you're always just asking yourself, what do I need to do to make the next thing happen? And so the whole point of this conversation is to really help you guys understand what the next thing is and how it fits into the flow of a deal or the flow of a transaction. So to make sure we're talking about those two terms interchangeably about how they work. That's the point. So understanding the 4 phases will make you a much better realtor, and having mastery of those 4 phases, having a smooth navigation of those 4 phases, I guarantee 100% beyond a shadow of a doubt, wherever you are, that's going to unlock the next level of production, is getting better at the 4 phases. So for example, if you're a realtor doing 1 or 2 deals and you keep getting bogged down in your own confusion and paperwork mayhem, that's preventing you from having more time to do your 2nd, 3rd, 4th deal in a month. If you're a 4 or 5 deal a month kind of realtor and you're at your capacity, well, understanding those 4 phases and understanding how to offload pieces of that to admin in an effective way is what's going to unlock your time to get to 6, 7, 8 deals. So, for example, it's all about giving better delegation. One of my favorite analogies is the way that you think about those 4 phases is like you are an airline pilot. So when do you see a pilot on the flight? They're kind of sitting there giving you a little wave, looking at their checklist at the start of the flight. At the beginning of the flight, they come over the intercom saying, hey, it's your pilot, we're flying, it's going to be dope. And then you fly away and the flight attendants make everything happen and the plane just gets you to where you need to go. Plane lands, and what happens? You get off the plane and the pilot's like, yo, what's up? And that's it. Everything that happens in between is handled by air traffic control and by the flight attendants. So your real estate transaction is no different. You need to be there at the beginning to build the relationship, earn the client, sign the buyer's brokerage, negotiate the contract, get it pending. Everything else that happens from a paperwork perspective in between is handled by the team. Then at that point of condition waiver, you talk to the client, make sure it's all good. If there's a problem, you fix it. You do the renegotiation, you negotiate the extension, whatever, you step back out. Admin does all the things during phase 3. Then you show up for possession key release. You make a big splash, you earn the testimonial, and then admin makes everything happen until they send you your EFT and you've been paid and your 5-star review appears. So that, but you're never going to be that person that's just there for the events. making sure that they happen, you don't have mastery of and understanding of how to delegate everything else that happens during the phases. So again, if you're a low producing realtor and you want to bump up your production, just being tighter on paperwork is going to do that. If you're a top producing realtor and you want to get to an elite level realtor, understanding that as a realtor, you need to be present for the events. Admin takes care of the phases. That's the next level. So whatever level you're at, getting better at this will bump you up a notch, guaranteed. So we're just about reaching our time, but I've got time for questions or comments if everybody wants to chime in.
That was very, very informative for sure. And nice to have a little rehash.
Awesome. Appreciate the compliment, Mitch. And yeah, this is critical watching. This is, again, admin's not sexy. Doing deals are sexy. But, you know, think about it like this. Having abs is sexy. Doing sit-ups for a year isn't sexy. You don't do the sit-ups, you don't get the abs. Being a top producing real estate agent, no different. You get good at this, you'll get better at deals.